Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCGPLAYER affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Quarters studio, and joining me today is Eddie.
Hello.
Eddie and I have not recorded for a while. Obviously, we didn't just record another episode.
No, definitely not.
Definitely not. Different hat, see? So definitely a different day. And like a different day, we have a different topic. Like a different day. It's a different day, so we have a different topic.
Yep.
And today's topic is leaning on Rule 0.
Yeah.
Now, for those of you that haven't played Commander, hi. Welcome to this channel. For those of you who have played Commander, you probably have heard of Rule 0 and might know what it is.
Yeah, it's kind of something unique to our format. Standard, modern, anything else like that. No Rule 0s over there.
Yeah,
so.
They basically just have, hey, these are the rules and this is how you play, and then it's just anything goes from there. But in Commander's a bit different because, again, Rule 0 is, yeah, we have rules, but also use them how you like them. Kind of.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's taking in the social aspect of the game rather than just the nitty-gritty rules of the game.
Yep, absolutely. I think I have it written down here. It's a rule that means a lot of things to a lot of players, but for many, it basically is about managing and setting expectations for a game of Commander. There is no right or wrong way to play Commander, and that's one of the things that makes this format great. You and your group can make it into the best version for your group.
Yeah, so I think a good analogy for this is kind of like when you're sitting on your couch, you got your pregame lobby of Super Smash Brothers, and before you actually start the game and start clobbering each other, you're deciding, do we want to, play with certain items?
Yep.
Do we want to change the settings around?
Is
How are
Kirby
we feeling?
banned?
Yeah. yeah, exactly. All of those things. So it's basically just getting everyone on the same page. So once you start playing the game, everyone knows what to expect.
Yep. And that can get a little complicated because obviously, if you've got your own group, at home, that's great. But, if you show up at an LGS, when that becomes a thing again, and you're playing, then you need to maybe reset expectations. And that's kind of, again, Commander's a social game, just talk.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, if there's any weakness to Rule 0, it's just that when you are solo, you kind of have to speak up for yourself. You have to be your own advocate. And if that's a little uncomfortable for you, that can be a little bit of a problem. But I'd encourage you, you deserve to have fun. So make sure that when you're sitting down to a game to just have those conversations. It's really important.
I actually have a solution, Eddie. I just saw this. Here we go. You know what?
What's that?
T-shirts. Everyone has a different T-shirt that says what they're okay with and not okay with. It's like no mass land destruction on the top of your T-shirt.
Ooh, or we could get those checklist cards from Ixalan where there's just bulleted lists and you say, this is
Yep,
this
just on a T-shirt. You can just you can check it yourself, and then everyone's walking around a convention.
Problem solved. That's the swag that you get.
I have solved it. Everyone just has to read T-shirts.
Yes. All right.
This episode's over then. We don't even need to talk about this. If you don't have to talk about it anymore, you just need a T-shirt. It's all
perfect. All right, but on a more serious note, there's some common house rules that whether you're at an event or someone else's house or an LGS, these are ones that you might see more often than others.
Yeah.
So these are kind of more fundamental, to changing the game. One that you had written down here is that some groups like starting out with the Monarch mechanic. It's such a fun mechanic that they might give it to the fourth player or the last player as kind of a pick me up, a little catch.
Or just have it in the middle of the table for whoever hits first, essentially, too. So it's just kind of there is kind of that in some groups might not like, the turtle kind of effect of a commander game, the battleship kind of commander where everyone just kind of sitting doing their own thing for 6 turns straight and no one's attacking anyone because they don't want to, upset someone else or whatnot. And putting the Monarch in there kind of says, hey, now there's a reason to attack early instead of just kind of building up everything late.
Yeah, I got kind of take some of the awkward feeling of I'll attack you with my mana dork because what else am I going to do? Or
giving aggressive strategies, more so a benefit.
Yeah.
Or just really helping out your restack for no reason. So that doesn't need help.
So that's just one example. What's another example we got?
Another group might not want to allow infinite combos. Or certain groups say, okay, you can do an infinite combo, but only X number of times in a row kind of thing. So, basically just saying, we're okay with winning in a lot of ways, but infinite combos aren't one of them, and that's okay.
Yeah, and that's less like changing the gameplay, but that's more of like an even deck building restriction.
Yep.
So yeah, that's neat. All right.
Or again, you can have it in there, you just can't use it. So wasted cards. And then also, I think the main one that people have is basically for certain groups is going to be like ban list adjustments, kind of basically. So maybe there's a card that your entire group agrees on the ban list that it shouldn't be banned, on the actual real ban list. And then maybe there's a card that, you agree should be banned. I know there are a lot of groups out there that don't play with Soul Ring, they don't play with Mana Crypt, they don't play with Mana Vault. Some of that fast mana kind of stuff. There are groups out there that don't play with those.
Yeah, and some play groups like just absolutely love the little otter Lutri.
Yep.
And so like maybe Lutri can't be a companion, but your play group's like toss him in the 99. It's fine.
Or as a commander or whatnot. Yep, exactly. Just not companion. Companion Lutri is overpowered.
Yeah, we'll touch on that again later.
Eddie will be in the comments responding to anyone who says differently.
I mean, sure, why not? Let's do this.
Just put that on you. I'm just kidding. Yeah, so I think that's the main thing we're going to be talking about today. And again, I think the expectation is, though, like, again, if you're going to an LGS or whatnot, the ban list that is the actual ban list is what the expectation is. So you shouldn't probably be running around with, Lutri as a companion, without asking people first, if that's okay.
Yeah, or like if you have silver bordered cards, like just make sure that it's okay and be okay if they say no.
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
that's a good reason to bring multiple decks if you have the ability to. That way, if you do have a deck that's like a custom commander, say, you can say like, okay, well, if you guys aren't cool with the custom one, I can totally use this one instead.
Yep. I mean, I've got my my rarity deck, which is the My Little Pony commander or whatnot. It's the silver bordered card. And I have not run into anyone yet who said, no, you can't play that. But I do have a backup. I can't remember what the backup's name is, but I do have a backup on the other side of the card that's just another Azorius commander.
Daxos.
Daxos. That's right. You got it. Yeah, Daxos. Yep. I have not had to use Daxos yet as a commander. But I will. If someone's not okay with it, that's completely fine because, again, the rules are no silver bordered cards. So, therefore, I've got a backup.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen it, go check out the Jank Lords. Awesome dudes. There's an episode called The Great Unbanning that we were both on. Super
and
fun.
Neither of us won.
Neither of us won. But it was a great game.
That's right. Eddie can lose. Even though he won in close quarters, he can lose.
It is possible. All right, so as Mitch said, the majority of this episode for Rule Zero is going to be talking about Rule Zero in the context of card selections, particularly bannings. So a lot of people have noticed that, despite the 20,000 cards in the game, relatively speaking, as a percentage, there's really not that many banned cards. Some people want more, some people want less, but on the whole, there's not a huge ban list.
Yeah,
and a lot of that is because of Rule Zero.
I was going to say Standard's got, 50% of the cards in Standard are banned or something like that, right?
Yeah, probably 99.
99% at this point, but
Basic Islands straight out.
Exactly. But yeah, in Commander, you've got probably less than, it's got to be less than percentage. It's got to be less than 0.5%. It's a very small percentage of it. There's 40 or so cards out of 25,000. Mathematicians in the comments below, please let us know what percentage that is, but very small percentage of cards that are actually banned. And actually in 2020, there were only a certain number of cards banned. We had Flash that was banned. That was an outlier that was banned for CDH, which doesn't have a Rule Zero, essentially.
Right.
Lutri, which we've talked about before, was banned because it's overpowered as a companion, because it's basically a free extra card if you're playing red and blue, which, again, just kind of giving a free advantage to decks for no reason. Isn't exactly, a thing that the format necessarily needs. Again, people can unban that in their own groups if they want to play with it on the side or whatnot. Yep. And then, basically kind of, I think the main crux of cards that are banned, or at least that have been recently, are maybe ones that are overpowered, but also might not seem that way, kind of, to some.
They're a bit tricky.
So like the Lutri one is kind of like a good example for that, because there are a lot of players out there like, oh, it's not really that overpowered of an effect, right? It's a copy spell. There are plenty other copies. It's a worse dual-caster mage, essentially, right? Basically. But because it's a free extra card, that's why it's banned. You get a free 101st card. Even if it was just a 3-2, I believe it's a 3-2 with Flash, even just a 3-2 with Flash, no other text on it, it would still probably be banned as, an extra 101st card that's free for decks just because you're playing red-blue.
Right. Yeah, it's not because of any power level for the little otter, and certainly not because he's too cute, because, we would all love to play Lutri, but as a companion, so there are reasons that a lot of these cards are banned. Agree or disagree with those. And Rule Zero is kind of the RC, the Rules Committee's way of saying, you can take our format as we present it. This is how we've had good experiences, and other people have had good experiences playing Commander. Make of them what you will.
Yep, absolutely. Again, Rule Zero says, hey, if I want to play with Lutri with my group, I can ask my group, and I can play with Lutri if they say yes.
Yeah, the rules committee's budget for policing the rules is about $0.
Yep.
If you break the rules
They're
at
not
your
coming to your
LGS.
house or your LGS.
Yeah, they won't take the cards away. I mean, don't be a jerk. Play by the rules.
Yep.
All those things. But at the end of the day, they're just guidelines.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, kind of same thing with, house rules for banning things too. If you want to ban something that's not currently banned, go for it. And that actually brings us to our next card, which had a lot of calls for bans this year, with Jeweled Lotus.
None other. So Jeweled Lotus, for those of you that have managed to miss that drama, is a 0-drop artifact that says you can tap it and sacrifice it to make 3 mana of any...
that sounds very familiar.
Oh, it does. Really?
It does. That sounds like Black Lotus.
Black Lotus. That one's banned, though.
It is. Is this the same thing?
But this isn't banned.
Okay, why not?
So Jewel Lotus can only be spent to cast mana if it's being spent on your commander.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and there was a lot of kind of immediate call for the rules committee to ban this. And I believe they immediately responded that it's not being banned and that they knew it ahead of time. But yeah, basically, in my opinion, the rules committee made the right decision for not banning it. It is a very powerful card, yes, but it is extremely circumstantial.
Yeah, it's one of those cards that definitely is something you need to be aware of. You're going to see it on tables from time to time, but it's not so broken that it warrants immediate action. And the Rules Committee has said that they'll keep an eye on it. It's definitely not something that they think is, carte blanche. It's going to be fine forever. Yeah. But they'll kind of see if it becomes a problem for the format and reevaluate later.
Absolutely. I mean, if everyone's running around with Urza decks with Jeweled Lotuses on turn 1, yes, that can be problematic. Obviously.
Yeah, that might warrant some RC action if literally no other decks are being built.
or Grand Arbiter Augustin or any other, just everyone's running a 4-drop commander with a Jeweled Lotus. And that's kind of the thing with a card like this, actually, where the more players that play it, the kind of more warrant for a ban it has, potentially.
Yeah, and that's really bringing it back to our core tenet of Rule 0 is that the community can make a decision. We as individual players collectively make decisions to play a card or not play a card. And Jeweled Lotus, if it becomes ubiquitous and it's everywhere in every deck, then that might warrant reevaluation by the RC, but they're hedging their bets that most people will not want this card in their deck, whether it's for deck building purposes or because they, we as players are like, that isn't really an effect that we think is enjoyable.
Absolutely. I don't think I could say it any better. The episode's over.
Yeah, great. Okay. There are a few other downstream impacts. Jeweled Lotus isn't the only card that came out this year, so I think the podcast can go on.
Okay. But I think Jeweled Lotus actually kind of illustrates something that's really important with that I want to kind of bring up in this episode, and that's specifically about leaning on Rule 0. And kind of what I'm saying that phrase, I'm more so talking about Wizards leaning on Rule 0. I mean, I guess I'm talking about both. The players lean in Rule 0 and also Wizards doing it. But when Wizards prints cards, they understand potentially what the potential impact a card might have. Yeah. With a format like Standard, when they print something that might be a little overpowered or a little pushed, something like Omnath, it's going to get banned. And in this case, it did get banned, and it got banned pretty quickly. But basically, in Standard, there have been more and more overpowered cards as of lately. I can't remember, someone put together like a chart of basically, bannings from 2000 to, 2015 or something, and it was like 1 or 0. It was like 1. It was like Jason Mind's or something. Yeah, and then all of a sudden, starting in 2015 or whatever it was, there's just more and more cards that are being banned every single year. I mean, I can't even tell you how many cards in Standard were banned this year because just things are getting printed that are, pushing and breaking the format.
And like we mentioned earlier, Standard doesn't have the luxury of Rule 0. It's a 1v1 competitive format. There's prizes on the line. So if a card is powerful, it will get played.
Your opponent plays Omnath, and you say, well, actually, I'm not really comfortable with you playing Omnath.
If you can read the t-shirt right here, it says
I've got
no
Omnath on the t-shirt. Well, now it's fine because it's banned, but yeah. But basically, so again, when Wizards prints things that are a bit too powerful for that format, things break, and they have to ban things. With a format like Commander, though, again, Commander is more flexible. Commander can kind of take those overpowered cards and still it won't break. And in fact, in my opinion, it's nearly impossible to break Commander specifically because of Rule 0. Because, again, the community can self-regulate even if the cards aren't regulated themselves.
Yeah, and I mean, every card slot is competing against such a large other pool of cards. Standard's only got, a small fraction, 5% of the card pool that Commander does. And so even if there is an incredibly powerful card, it has to compete against the history of Magic cards, which is a much more difficult task. So that is definitely a thing that is in Wizards' favor, that it is just tougher to do that. But it's also tricky because in a format, no matter how many cards are banned, there's always going to be a most powerful deck. And the competitive EDH crowd loves to test those limits and find the most optimal deck and how they play against each other. And like we talked about, Rule 0 is kind of agreed upon in that crowd.
As not really existing.
Not really existing. They are playing with one end game in mind, and that is the victory. And so in that type of format, if Jewel Lotus warrants a slot in the deck, it will get played. However, in most pods, in casual and even medium to high-powered games, you probably won't see Jewel Lotus an awful lot because it's a bit like Cyclonic Rift, although Cyclonic Rift does see a lot of play. It's one of those cards that people will be like, I've seen this before, I've done it. You might purposefully omit it from your deck, whether it's for price or for effect.
Yeah, I mean, and kind of, I guess, unlike Cyclonic Rift, is that its application is kind of like a dice roll. Like, if you have it on, the first, 8 out of 99 cards, essentially. If you have it in your first hand, or you draw it, or I guess if you mulligan, the percentages. Anyway, math, let me know in the description below on percentages of getting a Jeweled Lotus in either opening hand or draw. Then, it's an incredibly powerful card for the right commander. Again, if you've got a 4-mana cost commander like Urza turn 1, that's probably game over if there's no interaction. If no one has some way to deal with Urza, it's going to be pretty much game over pretty quickly with that. So you either run away with the game, or let's say later in the game you draw it. It's probably going to be a dead card for most decks at that point. Turn 10, you draw your Jeweled Lotus. Right? Great, I get a discount on my commander if my commander is in my command zone. Right. Or in my hand, or wherever you can cast it.
Yeah, and another way Wizards kind of leans on the way that Commander is built is that it's inherently designed to be a multiplayer game. 1v1 isn't necessarily the way that they're designing cards for, so if one card is especially powerful, you drop a turn 1 Soul Ring, turn 1 Jewel Lotus, get your 6-mana Commander out right away. Other players are going to take note of that, and you might get such a big lead that it won't matter, but at least it could be balanced out more than if it were a 1v1.
Yeah. So again, there's obviously the positives where, like that multiplayer format can deal with it. But again, if things are leaned on a bit too much, then that can still create a negative experience. A lot of non-games kind of where, okay, I just ran away with it right away. Or, basically the entire game was just working to stop one player.
And is that feeling of being the player that got the Jewel Lotus and got your turn 1 Urza, is that payoff in Wizards' mind worth the bad feelings that are instilled in the 3 other players? I mean, you're playing this big splashy card that does a powerful effect, but is that something that the format really wants, even though it won't break it?
Yeah, and I'm not saying that no one can play Jewel Lotus. I'm not saying you can't own Jewel Lotus. I'm just saying that I bet there probably are going to be some times when, it might not work out the way that you either thought it would, or, you do get what you want, and you get your Jewel Lotus in your opening hand, and the game kind of just ends right there.
Yeah, and you shuffle up, play another one. It all comes down to your play group. If that's something that sounds acceptable to you, go for it, play it. Another one that's kind of a good corollary to this that you had written down here is the much beloved card Armageddon.
Everyone loves it. 3 and a white, blow up all lands. I think that's exactly what it says.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple card. It's not well loved. And it's actually not banned either. It seems like an effect that would be so detrimental to the game would be banned. But as we discussed earlier, the rules committees basically found that most playgroups just choose not to run it. Is it a powerful card for certain strategies? Yeah, sure. But because of the gameplay pattern that it creates, most people either never cast it, or they cast it once and they're like, well, that was terrible. And then
that game took 5 hours.
And then they take it out of their decks and never look at it again.
Yeah. Again, actually, the perfect kind of example of cards that, the community probably doesn't like and would be banned, I guess, in a format that didn't really have a Rule 0 would be if you just look at the Salt score on EDH Rec. Just basically Armageddon's always at the top. You have Stasis or whatnot. Those cards playgroups just tend to not play, basically. And so instead of just actually banning them, they're just kind of like, it's kind of like a soft ban, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, like I said, the community as a whole, we've made individual decisions that collectively have amounted to no, thank you. We're not really in for that. So on EDH Rec, if you go to top cards, there's a little Salt subheader. About once per year, they put out a big a round of voting where everyone can click through a bunch of random cards and say how salty it makes you. And then they accumulate all those and have the results. So it really is interesting because the saltiest cards like Winter Orb and Stasis, which lock players out of the game, they're super salty, but they're in under 10,000 decks. But then you also see interesting outliers, which are obviously very controversial cards as well, like Cyclonic Rift, that is very salty, but is also in nearly 90,000 decks.
Yeah, there's an interesting, paradox to it, I guess. But yeah, just it is interesting to kind of see, what makes that list and then what cards are actually used versus not used. Commander's a very strange format to analyze and actually kind of see like how it all really works together, but it does. And that's kind of the awesome thing about Commander is that what other format can have kind of this, understanding this agreement, where you can play your deck against someone else who you've never met and two other people that you've never met, and just it just all works out, as long as you kind of all understand kind of those basic tenets of, this is how we kind of want to play, and if I want to do something that, many people don't want, like Mass Land Destruction, maybe I'll just ask ahead of time, and then it might be I'll have to have a different deck instead, or if I want to play my Silver Border Commander, I'll have a backup just in case. So.
Yeah, and I think one thing I wanted to add that isn't scripted, so hopefully this comes out correctly. But
we don't go off script, Eddie. We don't go off script.
Well, here we go. Basically, it's that one card might not be right for the entire format. It might get banned, something like that. But like card decisions and the way that you play the game probably won't even be right exactly the same between you and the person next to you or the person across from the table. Mm-hmm. Everyone's looking for just an ever so slightly different experience, but we all have to kind of, in that moment, play a game that we all enjoy. And I think a lot of us hope that whether it's the rules or the people that we're playing with make that game fun. But I think one way that we kind of need to approach it is that you need to kind of look to yourself a little bit. You need to be able to realize that someone else doesn't necessarily want to play the way that you do, and that's okay. Yep. And there's a lot of different ways that can manifest. And it's a kind of a topic that I think is really helpful for just getting more enjoyment out of what is and should be a game and something that you have fun with. So we did a podcast earlier this year called How to Be Salt-Free in Commander. I think it's something that I've learned a lot of different ways to kind of make sure that you're getting enjoyment out of the game that we all love. So take a look at that episode if that sounds like something.
Eddie's just trying to get more traction with you. Just like, check out this episode I was on.
Yeah. Back to things that are terrible.
No, I definitely agree. And I think that, a personal example is, one of my favorite decks that I ever built was my Jory deck. And eventually I learned that people don't like watching someone play solitaire for, 20 minutes in a row. So, I don't really play that one anymore. And then, I only bring it out against specific circumstances, like when Eddie's playing his Rashmi deck, which is just a disgusting deck that needs to burn in fire.
If you have a bunch of disgusting decks together, it can be fun.
If everyone agrees in the night, hey, let's make this a really quick one. Let's bring out our most powerful decks that we normally wouldn't play with, then you just go for it. But that, and then also. I also have learned in my time as playing Commander as well, people are only playing against 15 board wipes, so Selenia had to adjust. So,
yeah, and speaking of some cards that people might not like, there were another couple that earned some accolades this year alongside Jewel Lotus that people are wondering, will this get banned? Will it not? Will people run it? Will people choose to not run it? And as of this recording, a lot of the discussions are still ongoing, and two cards in particular are Opposition Agent, which is a 3-drop for 2 and a black. It has flash. It's a rogue of some sort that says if an opponent would basically search their library, you search for them instead, and you can play cards searched that way.
Yep.
So it turns off ideally tutors, but it also has the downstream impact of shutting off a whole lot of
fetch lands. Yeah,
rampant growth. Yeah. It shuts off Wayfarer's Bauble.
That is exactly why it needs to be banned. No, just kidding.
And the other much beloved creature is Hull Breacher. I believe it's a Merfolk, so Prof is excited.
Rogue, I believe.
Yeah. And another 3-drop flash. Some similarities here. People thought there might be a cycle, but it's just blue-black that gets these little toys.
Because white doesn't need anything. No. Green didn't, but red and white probably, yeah.
Right. And so Hull Breacher says if an opponent would draw a card outside of the one in their draw step, they don't draw, and you make a treasure, I think.
Essentially, it's a replacement for their draw. Instead, you get a treasure. So you wheel once, and then you win. That's how that works.
Yeah, basically, if you don't win from that point, you're at least going to be archenemy.
Yeah, it's like a Smothering Tithe plus like Narset, essentially.
Oh, any of those.
Kind of what it is, yeah. So
we wanted to bring these up because there are other examples of design in recent times that are really kind of pushing the boundaries of Commander, especially since these are in a product designed for Commander.
I don't think the excuse can come, well, this was for Standard. No, this was actually printed for Commander.
Absolutely, 100%. So these are things that, we're basically going to be on watch. Are these played? Are they not played? Are they banned? Are they not banned?
I think the current expectation is, again, kind of like Jeweled Lotus, where, certain groups will play it or certain, power levels will play it. I know that both of these, I know, I shouldn't say I know. I believe both of these are going to see a lot of play in CDH, which is great.
Yep.
Because they can make, big splashes there, and if the CDH crowd is okay with it, then that's great. They can all play with, incredibly powerful things like these. But if the more casual group, it starts seeing a lot more play in the casual group and people aren't liking it, then that's when you might be able to see a ban, depending on, what percentages these decks are showing up in, or what percentages these cards are showing up in decks. I can't talk right now.
Yeah, so they're just other examples of, like, the title implies leaning on Rule 0 and just how far you can lean before you fall over.
That's the subtitle underneath it. How far can you lean? Yes. The other one earlier this year, kind of right when Lutri came out, was Draenith Magistrate. I believe it's the same set, right? Ikoria. Yep. Yeah, there was people, calling for that to be banned, and I wrote this in the document, and then Eddie had a nice little comment, so he'll talk really quick here in a second. But basically, I personally have actually never played against it and have not played with it. But Eddie,
so I've seen Draenith Magistrate played a couple times, most often in a deck by our friend Eric. He was also on Close Quarters, playing the Elisha deck, and so he has a new deck based around Winota, Joiner of Forces, all about cheating humans, and specifically Draenith Magistrate is a human, so basically he can populate the board very quickly, and he uses Draenith Magistrate to basically, since he's playing an aggro deck, he wants to win quickly before people can get established, and Draenith Magistrate isn't in there just to be mean. It is there for him to basically be able to close out the game.
Yeah, Boros needs some help. So,
yeah.
But yeah. So, yeah, basically a good closeout. Again, the reason, I guess I should mention this before, the reason Draenith Magistrate is good, or actually was not controversial when it came out, was basically it shuts down people from casting their commanders because they're not casting from your hand.
Yes, exactly.
So basically, yeah, that was kind of like the other call for that as well. But again, I think the kind of the assumption by the rules committee at the time was that certain groups will play it, sure, that want to play with that kind of a power level of a card potentially, but also, I mean, again, I guess the thing with Opposition Agent, Hullbreacher, and Draenith Magistrate is they're all creatures, so they can be dealt with. But also just, some groups will play with it, sure. Some higher power level player groups will play with it, but then kind of the more casual players will not play with it, and it won't be a problem within casual formats. But again, it just kind of depends on how it ends up. You can't always predict things correctly.
And these are all interesting insofar as we want Wizards to do creative card designs. We don't want to have just rehashed versions of Rampant Growth all of the time.
I would love 10 Rampant Growths.
Some of us wouldn't love them to rehash cards all of the time.
Arcane Signet's the best thing that's ever been printed.
And so it kind of is a give and take, right? Like, we want cards that do new and interesting things, and there's plenty of cards that have scratched that itch, like the new Obeka card that's, I believe, in blue, red, black.
It's Grixis, yeah.
Grixis, yeah. Ends the turn if you want.
It's a Sundial of the Infinite, but for everyone.
Yeah, so it's new design space, but that one is pretty largely well received.
Yeah.
And so some of these cards, like Opposition Agent, Hullbreacher, Draenith Magistrate, even Jeweled Lotus.
Yep.
They're Wizards testing the boundaries using the design space in ways that it hasn't before, and sometimes it hits and sometimes it doesn't. So it's a tough thing because we want them to be creative, but not too creative.
Rein it in a little bit. Yeah, no. I think the main point I have right here is that Rule 0 does a lot of heavy lifting to keep the Commander format healthy.
It does.
So yes, there's the rules committee and the ban list and all these things, but like when it comes down to it, it's up to kind of the individual groups and players to kind of make this format really work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah, that's extremely simple. The last thing that I have here, I believe it's the last thing. Let me check my next page. Yes, it's the last thing. How much can Rule 0 be leaned on? I think that's the main question is, again, the more things that come out, right? I mean, Commander got its own set this year. I mean, outside of the Commander precons, we got even more Commander precons. We're getting more products day by day, essentially. More cards that are focused on Commander, as the kind of premier paper product, basically now.
There are cards that in, 2016 and before, we used whatever hand-me-down standard had to offer, and we enjoyed it. And now we're getting cards, whether they're included in these standard decks or supplemental things like Modern Masters or, premier products like Commander Legends that are specifically designed for us. And I think a lot of people are just worried. They've seen Modern Horizons and these other things that are...
Legacy's getting impacted these days by like the companions and stuff like that. Like, I mean, if Legacy can get impacted by, new cards coming out, then what can other formats do?
And so I think that makes people a little nervous. They see sets designed for formats specifically, and then those formats aren't always positively impacted. Sometimes they are. Sometimes there's good stuff, but there's definitely bad stuff too.
Yep.
And so when the sights are set on Commander, people rightfully get a little nervous.
Yeah, I think the little thing I wrote down right here is basically Commander's a format that it's nearly impossible to break, but that doesn't mean that it can't be. And it doesn't mean that, you need to keep always pushing boundaries to a certain point. Obviously, innovation is great, but at a certain point, if you keep putting, 10 overpowered cards in a set that the rules committee or that others need to kind of like decide on if they need to be banned or played with certain groups, the more kind of, conflict cards that you bring in, the kind of more arguments are going to be on whether or not this should be played in your group or another group or whatnot, and there's basically going to be more tension around those cards.
Yeah, and I think the next point you have here is very relevant too, is that if you're watching this episode, you are likely one of the more...
if you've made it this far.
die-hard, knowledgeable, flattery will get you everywhere, I've heard. You're very knowledgeable when it comes to Commander.
You're very smart.
But it is true. I mean, a lot of people don't have the time or inclination to be able to be this involved in the format.
Yep.
And so they might, just for the fun of it, do a draft or crack a pack of Commander Legends, and they see Jeweled Lotus. And they know nothing about all of the controversy that it's had. They don't know why it might be fun or unfun. They just see like, wow, this card reminds me of Black Lotus. I basically have a Black
Lotus. Yeah, how did I just get a Black Lotus?
And so they'll toss it in their deck. And the otherwise, like, pretty normal deck will all of a sudden have this one outlier of a card. They'll go and play a game, and then they'll plop down their Jewel Lotus and expect to have a great time, and then everyone at the table gangs up on them, or it could be a dead draw. Like, we've evaluated the card can be strong, but a lot of times it'll basically be a dead draw. And so the players who crack these packs and see these powerful cards might end up having a worse experience for it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, actually, and you just gave the example of, what if they open a pack? What if they spent $150 on it?
Yeah.
What if this is a new Magic player, a new player to Commander? They see, Commander Legends spoilers come out. They're like, oh my gosh, Black Lotus just got reprinted. I'm going to buy it right away. They buy it right away. They play it a couple times. A couple times it doesn't work for them. It doesn't come up until later, until a dead draw. Then finally it does work for them, and then everyone's like, okay, I concede. I've got no way to deal with your commander that you just got out on turn one. Let's shuffle and play again. And it wasn't really a fun experience for anyone at that point.
Was that worth $150?
And then they're like, can I sell this back? And now it's only $40 or whatnot. I think actually it might be down to $45 on TCGPLAYER right now.
Yeah,
so yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, hopefully none of you invested in Jeweled Lotus when it was $150 to start.
Yeah, and I think it is kind of deceptive though, because I know when I first started playing Commander, you look out to the community and you're like, okay, so these are the good decks, and they're running things like Wheel of Fortune. Well, like, do I need to spend, $200 on this Wheel of Fortune to have fun? And I think like this channel is a pretty demonstrable example of no. You can build an extremely functional deck that'll do a lot of the same stuff as long as you build a deck in an intelligent way. And so rather than spending $150 on a Jeweled Lotus that's designed for this format, we can use a bunch of cards from 10 years ago that'll when working together be even more powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can have multiple decks for the price of that Jeweled Lotus. So yeah, absolutely. I think the last thing I want to leave everyone with is a very known quote. I guess known to some, quote from Jurassic Park, a fantastic movie, and it was from Dr. Ian Malcolm. There we go. I got it right there. Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. I think that's basically kind of like the entire, it kind of sums up the Jeweled Lotus, right? The question is, can we put a Black Lotus into Commander and make it work? Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that mean that you should have?
No.
Probably not.
Like dinosaurs, it's cool.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
You don't want them running around in your cities. Jeweled Lotus is a dinosaur in cities, sometimes.
Yes, it is the T-Rex of the format.
Absolutely. I think that's all I got for today. Anything else from you, Eddie?
No, that's all I got.
That sums up. All right. Well, thank you, Eddie, for joining me on the show today.
Yeah, glad to be here.
And then I'm going to leave this with you all. Basically, in the comments below, let me know what are your thoughts about leaning on Rule 0? What are your thoughts about the cards that we brought up? Yeah, so just let me know in the comments below. And as always, thanks again and have a good one.